With all of this talk of inflation, recession, housing market corrections, or maybe even a crash, it's fair to say there's a lot of uncertainty across all markets right now. Real estate, of course, being one of them. As a realtor here in Chicago, I see it happening in the real estate market as interest rates have gone up and no one really knows what's going to happen next, among other factors at play, right? So while I'm not here to call myself an economist or a fortune teller or anything like that, I will share some thoughts I have on how you can best protect yourself against uncertainty in the real estate market right now. It'll be slightly skewed towards my Chicago market, but I do believe that anyone watching will benefit from it. My name is Jake Lyons, realtor in Chicago with App Properties and founder of thechicagohomesource.com, bringing you well-informed, data-driven content as always. If you are in the Chicago market and interested in making a move, contact me via the Calendly link below and let's chat. Even if you're not in the Chicago market, odds are I know someone in your area. So let's go ahead and get right into it. The first point I want to make is just to stay focused on the right stats. Pay more attention to what's going on in your specific neighborhood of interest than what's going on a national or even a regional or state level. That's not to say that the bigger data stuff isn't important or relevant. It definitely is. It's just that we all know real estate is a very hyper-local thing. It's a little sickening to say this out loud, but the phrase location, 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 it exists for a reason. What's going on in specific neighborhood X in Chicago is probably going to have very little to do with what's going on in California or Colorado or Texas or the rest of the Midwest or the nation or whatever. You're likely to hear a lot of splashy headlines about real estate this year because there are a lot of major metro areas that will probably have some steep declines. Chicago might be one of them. It might not be. I don't know. Either way, my advice is to keep your head on straight and see how it relates to what's going on in your specific area. The second point I want to get into is maybe the most important one I'll talk about, and that is to buy smart. Any savvy investor knows you make your money when you purchase. Buy too high, screw yourself over later. But what's too high, right? This is kind of the crux of the whole issue, isn't it? Well, we can't know for sure, but we do have some tools to at least point us in the right direction. To borrow some terminology from my old financial advisor days, use a mix of fundamental analysis and technical analysis. Ultimately, houses and condos are just an asset being traded on an open market, no different than shares of a stock, and can be evaluated in the exact same way. Fundamental analysis means looking at the factors that directly and indirectly impact the price of an asset. For a stock of a business, this means looking at the company's financial health, the company's competition, the company's leadership, things like that. For a real estate asset, this might look more like asking yourself, is appreciation in this area likely? And if so, is it sustainable? How are the restaurants, shops, and other local businesses doing? What are the schools like? Are people taking pride in and keeping up with their properties? Are there permits being pulled with the city that indicate new projects happening? What are the reasons that people want to live in this area, and will those reasons always be viable? Technical analysis, on the other hand, is basically looking at price charts and making educated guesses based on trend. This is essentially the goal of any day trader, to figure out what is likely to happen in the price of a security based on past data and make investments based on that data. For real estate, we can do this by looking at the 1, 3, 5, even the 10-year pricing data and see what that suggests is going on in the area for the type of property that you're talking about. Is the general trend an uphill one or a downhill one? Past performance is obviously not necessarily an accurate predictor of future performance, but sometimes it's the best indicator we have. No price chart will ever be all up and to the right in a linear fashion forever, but general trends can still be observed and factored into the decision-making process. One type of analysis is not necessarily superior to the other. They both need to be used in unison to paint the best picture that we can. The third point I'll make is don't over leverage. I know this is boring advice that you could find anywhere, but that doesn't make it any less true. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge proponent of using leverage for real estate, especially if that real estate can produce any kind of income for you. However, the fact is interest rates aren't what they used to be, and they're, who knows where they might be going from here. If you're in the position of sitting on a stack of cash and wanting to maximize it, you might be better serve to increase the down payment percentage, even if that means decreasing the purchase price that you might have qualified for. Not only is it potentially logical to place cash into real assets during high inflationary times when traditional equity investments may not beat out the rate of inflation, but this will also give you a nice cushion of baked-in equity in case the value of the property does fall a few percentage points, in those first couple of years. This isn't to say that you shouldn't still leverage as much as you can to buy a place if your risk tolerance can handle it, provided these next 2 points of mine are also true. My fourth point is to plan to own any property you buy for at least 3 to 5 years. Unless you're a property flipper or you were able to get a little bit of a fixer-upper and force some appreciation that way, 3 years tends to really be the cutoff minimum amount of time that you would want to own a property that you have a mortgage on. The reason is, before this time, it's less likely that you would have built the amount of new equity necessary to cover the closing costs, which as a seller can be anywhere between 7 and 10% of the purchase price. If you are unlucky enough to have bought before a market downturn, this obviously only exacerbates that issue. This is another reason why higher down payments help that risk, more equity right off the bat. Of course, it's also possible that the value of your home goes up enough in that time span to cover those expenses and then some, but even in the best of markets, that's not a bet I would advise you to go all in on. Another reason why 3 to 5 years is a good time frame to keep in mind is that if you look at the price chart for all houses in the US going back to the 60s, you'll see that besides the '08 crash, there has never been a time when a drop in prices wasn't corrected within a couple of years at most. Even that '08 crash, easily the worst and biggest outlier of them all, technically only took 6 years to recover from a median sales price point of view. And the fifth and final point that I want to say is to have a backup plan. Let's just say you did everything right. You bought in an area with strong fundamentals, you didn't over leverage, you had every intention of staying in that home for 3 to 5 years, but you have to leave. Maybe you got a job somewhere, maybe it's a family thing, maybe you just really need to get in a van and go find yourself in the mountains. Whatever the case may be, you need to go, and the market timing is bad. You're underwater on your mortgage and wouldn't be able to cover the selling expenses if you were to sell today. This is where having backup plans is essential, and most likely this is going to look a lot like renting out your home. Sure, you may not want to be a long-distance landlord or a landlord at all, but it beats going through the motions of initiating a short sale, or even worse, the F word, and all the wreckage that could mean for your credit going forward. Here in Chicago, it's not a given that the home you're buying will allow rentals, especially if it's a condo. So my advice to you is to at least consider that when factoring things into a decision on what you want to purchase. In general though, the best we can do is make educated guesses with the data and information that we have. Trying to time the market is likely a fool's errand. In the vast number of cases, the best time to have bought real estate was 10 years ago, and the second best time to buy real estate is now. Having enough patience, a long enough time horizon, and sticking to the fundamentals discussed in this video as best you can will hopefully set you up well to make the most of your real estate journey.